homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. My name is Jennifer. Welcome to Miles Away Farm. Thanks for joining me in my kitchen, and happy holidays. This video should be coming out right before Christmas. Today we are making a Dutch baby, also known as a German pancake, and there's a bunch of other names for it as well. This recipe comes from the New York Times, which is interesting. I don't know how I stumbled across it because I don't actually have a subscription to the New York Times recipe pages, but somewhere along the way I picked it up. And I love this recipe. It is super easy. We often do this on a weekend morning because you can make it all in a blender. It comes together super fast and it's really delicious and it's basically foolproof. I am gonna make this recipe in a cast iron pan. You could do this in other utensils, but the cast iron pan, because Dutch babies get their lift from steam, not from any leavening agent, and because you need some good heat to really create that steam, cast iron is really nice because you preheat it in the oven and then you pour the batter into it and it just immediately starts to get some lift and let off some steam. So recommend cast iron if you can. This is a number 6 Lodge cast iron pan, and fun story about this pan. In 1990, I moved from the Bay Area, where I had lived for a good chunk of my life, most of junior high and high school, to Boulder, Colorado. And when I was in California, all of the leasing in apartments and things was a month-to-month lease. And so that was really common in what I was used to. When I moved to Boulder, Colorado, everything was a year lease, which I guess is much more common all over the country. And I just had no exposure to it because I had been in California. I moved there with a boyfriend and we weren't really sure exactly where we wanted to be in the city or even what we were doing. We were just trying to figure things out. And so we rented month to month this little apartment that was actually a townhome condo that was for sale. And we did it as a month to month because it was for sale, with the agreement that we would keep it nice and neat and that they could show it with some notice. And it was partially furnished, which was nice because we were young, we were in our mid-20s, and we had moved from California to Colorado with a U-Haul and what we could get in the car. So we didn't have much in the way of furniture. And so having a furnished apartment was really nice because we were kind of starting over. And that included a furnished kitchen. In that kitchen was this cast iron pan. The woman who had owned the condo had decided to move to France. And so she had just moved to France, didn't take her stuff with her, left everything behind. So the apartment was furnished. And then fairly quickly, within a couple of months probably, the apartment sold and we had to move out and figure out what else we were going to do. But because I knew all of that history and I knew that whoever was going to buy it was going to have their own stuff because they were going to own the place, I left with this pan because it was a beautiful, well-seasoned cast iron pan. And even in my early to mid-20s, I knew it was something that I was supposed to have and supposed to love. And so I took this pan and I used it occasionally for about 10 years. I didn't love it. I had a hard time figuring out how to cook with it and kind of struggled with it. And then I had some house sitters that were friends of mine, and they house sat for me for a week while my husband and I were on vacation. And they destroyed this pan. They didn't know anything about cast iron. They didn't know how to care for it. And they scrubbed the bejesus out of it and basically ruined all of the seasoning on it. And so I re-seasoned it. One of the ways that you can re-season cast iron is to put it in your oven on the oven cleaning cycle. And basically it gets so hot that it cooks off whatever seasoning is currently on the pan. And so I did that and then re-seasoned it. And somehow that process of making that season my own somehow basically made it mine in a way that it had not been in all of those years. And so I really started using it frequently. And this is my favorite pan. Like, I take this when we go car camping or camper camping. I cook in this pretty frequently. It's a really nice size. The actual diameter of this is about 9 inches across at the top. And I'm going to guess it's about 8 inches at the bottom. Yeah, it's an 8-inch at the bottom. It's just a great sized pan for lots and lots of different things. This is an older Lodge. It's probably from the 80s. And so it has a fairly smooth bottom. I noticed that the Lodge pans that you see in the stores now, the bottom of them is wildly textured. And I think they've just changed their process of how they cast the cast iron. Either that or they're just not finishing them as much as they used to, but the bottom of them is super textured. Not my favorite thing. I'm sure there's a way to make those work with enough seasoning over time, but I really cherish this because it's a 40-plus-year-old pan. And because of that, it's very nicely made. If you're looking for new cast iron and you're not able to find one of the classic heirloom varieties, the two heirlooms that you see all the time that everybody is looking for is Wagner and Griswold or Giswold. I'll put it on the screen. I always get the name wrong. Both of those, it's a different casting process. They're thinner, they're lighter weight, and they're smoother. And that's part of why those old vintage pans are such a delight to cook with, because they're smoother and they also don't weigh a ton because it was a different type of casting. And so they were able to make them thinner. If you want a new version of that, I have a Field cast iron pan. And I'll put a link to that in the description below as well. Not sponsored, but they actually started out as a Kickstarter program because they had vintage pans and they started asking the exact question that I just said, which is, why is it that the old cast iron is so much better than the new stuff? And so they really went down the rabbit hole. They figured out all the differences in the manufacturing between the old stuff and the new stuff. And then they actually started manufacturing their own. And so Field pans are not inexpensive, but they are absolutely wonderful. And I love them. There's several other brands out there that are doing similar work. I don't know the names or have personal experience with any of those, but I do have a larger size. It's probably a 12-inch Field cast iron that is new that I also absolutely adore. So if you're looking for cast iron, those are the brands that I would look for. Either look for an old vintage one or look for a Field pan. They're fantastic. If you're buying old vintage, one of the things to know is if you pick it up and ding it, and I'm not hanging this very well, but it should resonate a little bit. That's a good indication that it doesn't have a small hairline crack. And then also, you should not be able to spin it. If you can put it on a flat surface and spin it, it's an indication that the bottom is warped from heat and it's got a high spot and a low spot, and you'll be able to spin it on the bottom. Those are indications that the pan, while vintage, is probably not worth buying other than just decoration on your wall. So there's a couple of fun tips about cast iron, and we're gonna make a beautiful Dutch baby in this cast iron pan. I actually it's an eggnog Dutch baby because I had some eggnog in the fridge and I thought it was going to be fabulous. But when you really think about it, what is eggnog besides sugar and milk and eggs? And what is a Dutch baby besides sugar and milk and eggs? So basically I made an eggnog Dutch baby that tasted exactly like a regular Dutch baby because the eggnog was pretty much the same ingredients. So kind of funny. I was expecting something delightful and basically ended up with the same thing that I always get, which is also delightful, but really not any different from a normal Dutch baby. So Dutch babies, wonderful weekend breakfast or Christmas breakfast if you're not somebody who's doing cinnamon rolls or a breakfast casserole for Christmas morning. Let's get started.